To make our salad a little extra special, we are going to make homemade croutons, and you could do this with any bread or buns that you had, but I happen to have Texas toast bread, so it's nice and thick, and that works out great for the size I want to cut this. We're going to cut this into a large dice, which is 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch, and it's already about that thick. So we're going to leave that thickness, and we're going to use our serrated knife or bread knife so that we don't smash it when we cut it. And we're going to cut this into 4 columns that are about 3/4 of an inch. And then we're going to go the opposite direction and do that again so that we get cubes or dice that are 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. We're going to take those bread cubes and make our croutons. And we're going to do that by putting our 6 tablespoons of butter or margarine into a large skillet over a medium heat. Medium heat would be 5 or 6 on a numbered dial. And we're just going to let that melt before we add the bread cubes. Break it up a little bit, it'll melt a little faster. More surface area in contact with the heat. And then I've also got my seasonings here. I have garlic powder, salt, and I decided to add the thyme. I like the flavor that adds to the croutons. And these can be made ahead, and they can be stored for a couple weeks in an airtight bag or an airtight container. If you have never had homemade croutons before, you're really missing out. And like I said earlier, when I was cutting the bread into cubes, you can use regular bread, you can use Texas toast, you could, like I am, you could use even leftover hot dog or hamburger buns. So go ahead and we'll start adding those bread cubes. And then as our butter melts, we want to make sure that they get coated in that melted butter. And because we're doing them in the skillet, we want them to dry out a little bit. And because we're doing them in here, we want to kind of keep a single layer so that helps them to toast a little bit. And we're going to stir those periodically as we go. So again, I want to get that those bread cubes covered in the melted butter or margarine. 6 tablespoons, so almost, not quite a whole stick, but almost a whole stick. Right in between a whole stick and a half stick. Because if you recall, there are 8 tablespoons of margarine in a stick. Make sure when we pause with them in a single layer. And we're going to go ahead, now that most of them have some of that melted butter on them, we'll go ahead and sprinkle our spices, our herbs. And we'll stir those again. This is about a 10-minute process. And we just go through periods of stir. You definitely want to pay attention to it the whole time. Don't leave it because they could burn pretty quickly if you turn your back on them. Whenever we pause stirring, we want to make sure it's in a single layer. And in just a minute, I'll show you what they should look like at the end. When your croutons are finished, they'll have this nice golden brown color that you can see across them. They'll be a little dried out, as croutons should be, and they'll add a delicious flavor and a great texture to your salad. For our ham, we're going to cut the ham into a bâtonnet cut, which is 2 inches by 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. We're going to use our chef's knife. And remember, when we use the chef's knife, you should choke up on the knife, which means your index finger and your thumb go on the knife, and your middle finger, ring finger, and pinky finger go just below the blade. That gives you the most control. So we're going to go 1/2 inch. The ham itself is about 1/2 inch thick, so that makes one cut for us. And then we're going to go about 1/2 inch wide. And if you want to cut continuously, you either have to move the knife down the food or the food under the knife. And remember, your guiding hand, your non-knife hand, should have the fingers tucked in at all times. So we've got this nice column, this stick cut. It's a little bit big. So it's about 4 inches, so we're gonna cut this about in half. And we have cut our ham into a bâtonnet. Now we'll cut our cheese. I have 4 ounces of cheddar cheese here, and we're gonna cut this into a pie-sane cut. A pie-sane is a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/4. So it's gonna end up being a flat square. We're gonna use our chef's knife. We're gonna choke up on the knife, and we're gonna cut 1/2 inch slices. Remember to keep that guiding hand curled back. And then we're going to take those slices and cut those into 1/2 inch columns. So basically I have a bâtonnet of cheddar cheese, a bâtonnet cut at this point. But instead of leaving it at that, we're going to cut down these stick cuts at 1/4 inch. If I went 1/2 inch again, it would be a medium dice. But instead I get these nice flat squares of cheddar cheese to add to our salad. Next we're going to cut our tomatoes, and for those we're going to cut a rondelle cut. So we're going to start by using a serrated knife. It has these saw-like teeth. Sometimes a bread knife would work just fine, but I have a slightly smaller one that I like better for working with the tomatoes. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut just the very top off of each of the tomatoes and dispose of that. And then we're going to cut them into rondelles. And the reason we use the serrated knife is because the tomato has a tough outer skin that can be difficult to get through, but a soft inside. So we don't want to squish it in the process of cutting, which a regular knife paring or chefs might do. So I'm just going to take my serrated knife and make circles that are about 1/4 inch thick. And that's a rondelle, a circular food that's 1/4 inch thick slices. So you can see the serrated knife doesn't smash it. You may have noticed that I switched to a colored cutting board. So try to keep things separate to help prevent cross-contamination. So protein foods like meats and cheeses, I cut on white cutting boards. And the vegetables are cut, and breads are cut on colorful cutting boards. So you can see there's our rondelled tomatoes. Now we'll work with the cucumber. So for the cucumber, we're actually going to use the paring knife and the chef's knife. For the cucumber, we're going to use the paring knife to peel the cucumber. We're just going to run down the cucumber as close to the skin as possible so that we leave as much of the vegetable available for the salad as we can. And then once we've removed all of the skin, we're going to just cut that in half, and we're going to use a spoon to scrape out the seeds. The seeds are probably the most objectionable part of the cucumber for most people. And it gives us a few more options as to how we handle the cucumber for our salad. So we're actually going to medium dice this, and for that we'll use the chef's knife. And for our medium dice, we need a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Again, cleaning the board to keep it safe to work with. So we're going to cut 1/2 inch columns, and the cucumber is about 1/2 inch thick. So then we'll take those 1/2 inch columns and turn them to the side so that we can cut a 1/2 inch down. Notice the tip of the knife stays on the cutting board. Push that aside, but I'm going to turn it to the spine when I push. You never push with the blade because you'll dull the blade. Move the knife down the food to continuously cut. And there's our cucumber. So now we'll cut into our onion, and we need to take off the outer layer. So we're going to take off the top and the bottom of the onion. Just going to make it a little bit easier. And then we're going to peel that outer dry layer off. And if it looks a little dry under there, we'll take off one more layer. This one seems to be okay. So we're going to mince our onion. And mince is very fine pieces, so very small pieces. So I'm just going to take a couple of slices, and then we're going to go in opposite directions. Notice how I have the tip of the knife down on the board. A little more control. Now, to get this really small, we're going to rock back and forth across our ingredient. Notice I keep the tip down on the board with my guiding hand. I'm choked up on the knife. And if I have to push it back together, I use the spine, not the blade, because I don't want to dull my knife. So here I have some nice minced red onion to add to the salad. For our carrot, we need to start with peeling our carrot. We're going to use a vegetable peeler. It's important to note that the curved side goes against the food, and just a slight bit of pressure, it should move easily on the carrot, or you could use this for potatoes, and it should happen without much effort if you're doing it correctly. So we'll move the peel out of the way, keep our cutting board clean to keep it safer to work. So we're going to use our chef's knife again. We're going to put the tip of it down on the board so we get more control. Cut off the top, the very tip and the bottom of the carrot. And then we want to cut this into a julienne cut. So that's going to be 2 inches by 1/8 by 1/8. So I'm going to cut this into 2-inch pieces. And then because it's round and rolls, the first thing I'm going to do is take off just a tiny slice to make it sturdy so it doesn't move as much. And then I'm going to keep my guiding hand curled back, tip on the board for that greater control. And I'm going to cut 8-inch wide slices. And then I'm going to take those 1/8 of an inch wide slices, stack as many as I'm comfortable working with. Again, guiding fingers curled back, tip of the knife stays on the board, and I get these nice matchstick pieces. So first, little slice to make it steady, to make it safer to work with. 1/8" slices. Tip on the board, fingers curled back. Stack those up. And we have julienne carrots. For our greens for our salad, we're going to use a mixture of iceberg lettuce, romaine lettuce, and spinach. So we're going to work with the lettuce, the 2 lettuces first. To get ready to use this, we would need to remove the core. So the easiest way to do that is to smash it down. And then the core pops right out. Then we would take off a couple of those outer leaves that don't look so good. And those would be garbage. If we had a rabbit or a small animal, they would appreciate them, but for those of us humans, we'll just get rid of those. And then if I did not have this specialty tool that I'm going to show you, I would want to take the leaves apart, rinse them in cool water, pat them dry, and then rip them into small pieces. Same goes for our romaine, where I would cut the bottom off so that I could then separate the leaves more easily. But what we're going to do instead is we're going to go ahead and put them in this little basket. This basket is part of a salad spinner, and I'm going to rip these into bite-sized pieces. And I'm going to not put the fibrous stem in there. So like with my romaine, I'm going to go up the side to the top, and I'm going to eliminate the fibrous stems. And I'm going to rip this into small pieces. And then I'm going to rinse it. So I'll show you that in just a minute. So what I've done, I took my lettuce, I put it in the little basket, and took it over to the sink and rinsed it with water. You can see there's a little bit that has dripped off of it already. But we're gonna make sure we get all of it off of there. So we're gonna put the lid on, lock it in place, and then we're gonna spin. Turn the dial so it spins, and you can see it creates a centrifuge effect where the water is just pulled off of the lettuce from within the basket. I'll open that up. And you can see there's a lot more water in the outer bowl. So that's how you use the salad spinner. It makes it a little bit easier, but it's definitely an extra item. Not every kitchen has one. And unless you eat a lot of salad, it may not be worth the investment, but it is handy if you happen to have one. For our spinach, we are going to use a chiffonade cut. So we're gonna remove any of these large stems, and we're gonna stack up several leaves. And then we're gonna take that stack of stemless leaves and we're going to roll it tightly. So you do this a lot with various leafy herbs. And then we're just going to make 1/4" cuts with our paring knife. And you can see it gives a different look than the rest of the lettuce. And so when we add that to our salad mixture, it adds eye appeal to have that different size cut, a little more uniform than what we did with just the regular lettuce, the romaine and the iceberg. Get rid of those fibrous stems again. Nobody likes to find those in their salad. And the spinach adds another shade of green, but it also adds a lot of nutrients. So the darker your greens are, the more nutrients that they have. So our spinach is a great addition to a salad. And really, when you eat it raw, most people can't tell the difference between it and lettuce anyway. So here we have all the components of our salad brought together. We have a bright, colorful plate of vegetables and proteins that could be added to our variety of greens, and some fresh made croutons, all ready to put together and enjoy.